Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to host this roundtable. And the topic is digital fashion, navigating the post-hype hiatus and charting the course for the future. And today we have Clare Tattersall, founder of Digital Fashion Week. Hi, Claire. And
Hi.
we have Leslie Holden and Sean Chiles, the co-founders of the Digital Fashion Group. Hello, Leslie and Sean. And
Hello.
Richard Hobbs, the founder and CEO of Brand New Vision and BMV Foundations. Hi, Richard. Yeah,
Hi, Ching.
what a wonderful lineup. Welcome, welcome. So before we get into the session, so I would like to just briefly deliver some messages. So over the last few years, the digital fashion landscape has evolved at a remarkable pace and bringing us to a pivotal moment where we must consider its future trajectory. And the key questions arise. So where is digital fashion headed? And how are innovations like AI, AR, XR shaping its path? And then what implications do these technologies have for sustainability, creativity, and the broader fashion industry? So as digital fashion mature beyond its initial wave of excitement, in this session, we will explore what's next. And today, our speakers will delve into critical questions and discussions on the key challenges and opportunities in this new landscape. So in this session today, Leslie will be moderating the discussion. And during the session, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the YouTube live chat, and I will pass it on to the speakers. Okay, so now I'll hand over to Leslie.
Great, Ching. Thank you so much. Great to be here. And we've got some great pertinent questions to think about and to discuss, and we're just going to have a conversation. And we four know each other really, really well. So this is just like an ongoing conversation that we have anyway. So, and the first question that I think is really important for us to discuss is a kind of definition in a way. Let's open this up with defining clearly what's, digital fashion seems to be a kind of catch-all term in many ways. I mean, people use it to describe lots of different things in digital to do with fashion. And what is digital fashion anyway, as opposed to the digitalization of fashion, which are two quite different things. Claire, maybe you would like to jump in there with your first thoughts.
Yeah, so it is really important to make this clarification, and people who are not in our tight community of people in the digitalization, you constantly have to really explain what is the difference between digitalization and digitization of fashion. So digital fashion is digital fashion assets, things that are purely made to start in the digital world. It is such a broad topic. I really look at digital fashion as the starting point. It's where we design, and it's where we take it from there, where we take it into gaming or we take it into physical production. But it is, digital fashion is, to me, the digital assets and the starting point, where we go with them from there.
Yeah, yeah. And Sean or Richard, do you have anything to add to that definition?
I can jump in and say from my point of view, it's a kind of catch-all, as you say, that really embraces, for me, and I think for Digital Fashion Group, as we started, digital transformation in the fashion industry, which is a really important element for the development of digital creativity from a designer's perspective, and the changing of the processes, and an impact on sustainability, for example. Thinking about it, I had a thought which was interesting, that to a certain extent, digital fashion, as in what appears in the digital world as fashion and is worn in gaming and in try-ons or that kind of area, is a whole new marketing field, and that's something that kind of spurred everything on. I know we're gonna come to some other questions that probably start to touch on this, but for me that was an important realization that especially in relation to sustainability, it's a new market and it's a new field, and therefore it's actually creating something new, not replacing something. So you're not getting rid of anything with the digital fashion that appears online, but it has the potential to really change the process in fashion design and development and manufacture in the future. And that's kind of the kind of nirvana in the end, I think, what we want to achieve with digital fashion.
Yeah, yeah. Richard, anything to add?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if I can do a little bit of history, I mean, I started BMV in 2016, and at that time, it was done because I've been in the industry many years, as you're very aware, and have seen a lot of the good and many of the bad things about the way the fashion industry works. There's the cycles in design development and sort of thing. And I break it down. It's slow, it's inefficient, it's often wasteful, and it's damaging. You know, we overproduce, we overconsume. So what I wanted to do with BNB back in 2016 was, how can we use technology to improve those processes, make them faster, make them less wasteful, make them less damaging? And that was really where it started. And it wasn't specifically about digital fashion, but as I built it, and the tools that were then available around that time, meaning our good friends at CLO 3D and Browseware specifically, had really developed a long way from when I'd looked at them maybe 4 or 5 years previously, that you could actually almost indistinguishable high quality renders from a fashion photo shoot if you did it well and with the right tools. And that's like, wow, this is amazing, because you can actually create product and go through the whole process of design, conceptualization, validation, and selling without making a single piece of a garment. And that was the driving force of me originally, was like, this should be, every company should be using this. You know, and I was, I don't know if you guys know PI Apparel, you know, the platform that was there. I was the chairperson for that in Hong Kong. And I was like, I was trying to say that there's a lot of people there were already dealing with the digitalization of fashion, let's say, or the digitization, whichever way you want to bring, but they were stopping at a certain point. They were just using it as a creative tool to help the design and development process. And I was saying, you've got these assets now, you can do so much more with them. You know, you can use them for marketing, you can use them for promotion, you can use them for internal validation. Potentially, you can sell them. And this was before the concept of NFTs and metaverses had really kicked in. But that was what I was trying to say at that time. And it goes back to what Clare was saying. You know, that digital asset is the key now. It's what you can do with that. It's what people can, the value that they can gain from that, the utility that they can gain from that, the desirability, and hopefully it can make the rest of the industry better.
Even though there's been a kind of, well, a feeling of a hiatus in digital fashion recently, there's still so much that can be done with digital fashion. That's not really been considered, as you say, Richard. The assets have not really been taken through the whole supply chain as effectively as they could be. But one thing that has come into the playground recently, which has changed a lot of the focus of what we're doing with digital fashion, or digital in general, is AI. And how would you say that AI is reshaping the creation, the distribution, and the consumption, and the way that we're seeing digital fashion? Sean, would you like to jump in there?
Sure. I think the development of AI is very interesting from many perspectives, of course. It's also very new in terms of it being very public and very known about, but it's been around for a long time in terms of machine learning and everything. So it isn't new. What's new is how it's being used and how it can be applied, and the accessibility of it. And I think that the accessibility of it is the interesting element at the moment. And, you know, we've all tried out, and we all work with the newest AI programs and apps, I'm sure, that it's something that is able to support and help in the development of things that you want to do. From a designer's perspective, I see it as being really something that can help organize and take or drive certain inspiration for a designer once they've been through their original process of design and development, because I think that's still really important, is understanding as a designer that you need to research, you need to look, analyze, conclude, and then create, if you like, and make your decisions and create. In that process, the AI is going to be really, really useful, and we see it with work we've all been involved in how it is useful and the results it can give. Apart from that, and of course it's growing and changing every day, every week in terms of its relationship to fashion, I would say. And that's being pushed by the people that are using it, such as designers, for example, who are pushing it, experimenting and seeing what comes out. My own observation is that it gets a lot of things wrong and it can't do everything at the moment you think it will be able to do. And I also see in my own research that people are saying there will be a limit to it. And some of that limit may also be hit at the moment, which is an interesting concept. But back to how you use it as designers and the impact that it can have. It can help you in your design process. It can help you, and it help a brand in the development process, and it can help manufacturers in the manufacturing process. I think it also has a really good place sitting in retail, for example, where if you were to allow it to manage your distribution and manage your markdown, for example, and your stock, it can have a real impact on the bottom line of your business. And that's a really interesting thing for the business. But on the creative side, I see a lot of what comes out of designer work in AI as being more fantasy. This is really suited to digital fashion that stays in the digital world, not a problem, but not suited to, for me, to the creative development of a designer in their vision, let's say. It can help you form your vision, I think. So it's something that is interesting, is useful, and that is growing in terms of what it can do and the impact it can have. But I think one of the areas that it can have a real impact is actually on sustainability in the future.
And I think that this technology, as well as 3D virtual prototyping in another way, it can help with creatives who possibly don't have as much training in fashion. If you'd gotten through the whole course, and the BA and the MA or whatever. So it opens up the doors for different kinds of creatives. Claire, AI, how do you?
Yeah, so, I hear so many questions out there about, is it going to take my job, etc. I think analogies help. They help me understand something. I see it as we're moving between a hand crank sewing machine and plugging it into the wall and having an electric sewing machine. It gets us where we want to go faster.
Yeah.
I think AI teaches us very much what makes us human. It doesn't replace us, but it really emphasizes our humanity. And I think at the core of our humanity is that we are creative and that we are innovative. And it really supports these two aspects of our humanity. I think I don't think it necessarily at the moment, obviously it's very much in development, helps fill, I don't think it helps designers who aren't as creative be creative. Talent rises to the top. You have to have a vision. You have to have the understanding of how fashion works, how to create, how to market. You have to understand your consumer. You can use it to do the research, to speed up your processes, to create mood boards. I saw an amazing tool that Matthew Drinkwater yesterday posted on LinkedIn, where, you know, it takes your sketch and turns it into a design. But you've got to have the vision there in the first place. You have to be a creative person. You have to have your brand vision and know where you're going. And it can just help push you through the tunnel much, much faster. So I think it's really interesting. And as Sean says, it's been there for a long time, but the accessibility has really changed. I think it's really exciting. I think we saw at the beginning of 2023. So, you know, almost 2 years ago now, it sort of exploded onto the scene with Midjourney, and people were producing all these images, and they were really fabulous and absolutely stunning. And then that faded out because just, you know, that creation purely for the sake of just creating without functionality behind it, the shininess wore off that really fast. And it's like everything, we move through the hype cycle and then we actually look, what is the real purpose? And so I see it so exciting on how we shop, how you know, we can get what we want. There's Sociate AI, that they have this amazing tool for where when you're shopping, finding what you want, eliminating what you don't want, really getting to the end goods. It's a win-win for everybody. You know, it stops, if we're looking at the shopping part of this, which is a really important part of the digital fashion conversation, is not having the returns, getting what you want much sooner, getting the sizing that you want much sooner. So looking at the AI that we have for the point of retail, for the design process, you know, from sketch to image to helping all at every point through the pipeline. So yeah, I just see it as really plugging it into the wall and making everything, helping us get there faster.
Yeah, great points. Richard, is there anything you want to add to what Clare and
just to elaborate, I mean, the analogy that I've always used, and I used it 2 years ago, exactly when you were saying, when it all came out. I remember Christmas 2022, spending most of the time playing with Midjourney and ChatGPT and experimenting. But the key thing I've always said is it's a tool. It's something that as a creative, you should have access to and use it in a way that enhances your capabilities and your vision and and I always use the analogy, it was like the transition from scalpels, cutting boards, and spray mount to Photoshop and Illustrator. You know, for a while it was, oh my God, what is this? And how are you going to ever do anything? I'm used to being stuck in the corner getting high on gas fumes. But once people got to use it, and so I remember seeing like super good Illustrator wizards doing things 20 times faster than I could even visualize them, and sitting down to, can you do this? Can you do that? And then saw the creativity and the speed of evolution of an idea was incredible. That's what you can do with AI tools, is you still got to have the idea, you still got to have the vision, but you can use this to speed up the processes. And harking back to Sean's point, and also what Claire touched on at the end, the machine learning side of things should be the bit where you can really actually make a difference. Because if you're using data and analyzing that data and reviewing it using as many of these tools that can say you can hopefully produce less of waste and make the logistics side more efficient. And these are all the bits and pieces where merchandisers or planners or strategists would be sitting behind spreadsheets and using gut instincts in a lot of decision-making process to decide whether we make 64 large or 64 medium. Now you can actually potentially use that to be a lot more defined about what product gets made and shipped. So those are my two things. It's a tool, and it's still not being used to its best advantage in other areas of commercial.
Yeah. Yeah,
success.
and data really empowers, doesn't it? I mean, when you're able to use that data to get the information, particularly as a designer, it's one of the things that we say a lot in the digital fashion group, that designers have to learn about how to use data. And it's something that education has to really focus on a bit more, on teaching students how to understand and use the data properly. Other new technologies, AR and VR. You touched on sizing there, and of course, to ensure that we get good technology for virtual try-ons, will be a huge benefit for the sustainability of the industry, to make sure that people are trying on the right sizes and being able to order the right size of garments. Going forward with AR and VR, are there other applications, the exciting applications that are happening, new things that you know of? Richard,
I'll say no.
No.
I haven't seen anything yet. I mean, after obviously Vision, Apple, and various Meta configuration, we were all like, "Wow, this is amazing! Look what's going to happen next." And obviously, that was a very early stage developer kit type model and too expensive and whatever. I mean, I can see lots of potential applications for AR in many aspects. I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't seen anything or come up with anything where I can say that's going to make a real difference in the fashion industry. I think it's fun, it's cool, it's a great marketing tool, it's really engaging, and from that perspective, superb. No problem at all. I looked at virtual try-ons like 7 or 8 years ago, and and talked to some of the bigger companies that are involved in that type of thing, or certainly in fine-tuning the business of actual making those products. And it just seemed to me this is going to be really hard work. It's going to be a real struggle to make this truly effective. But I absolutely have no problem with them being used, to say, for marketing and events and holograms and projections. I think it's all good for that. But I haven't seen anything that says, wow, that's a game changer that's going to make the industry better. And that's what I mean, and I'm banging the same drum. That's what I'm trying to do. So what I want to be able to do is use digital tools and digital fashion to make the real industry better than it currently is.
Yeah. Yeah. And Sean, anything that you can think of?
Yeah, I think it's such great technology and such a great experience. That's the really interesting thing of existing VR, for example, and AR. The thing that it lacks, although that you have the ability to combine it a lot with AR, is the feeling of things. So the touch and the engagement with something that's real. So engagement with real and engagement with something that's digital is different, and therefore the emotional response is different. For fashion, if you don't have the emotional response, fashion becomes very different. And that's something I think that's really important we have to think about going forward. How we solve that, with tactile options to do with VR and AR in the future, going to be interesting with olfactory senses and all that. I mean, people have tried doing this, I think 15 years ago, I looked at things that were about scents that you could smell through being produced by a computer or whatever, maybe even 20 years ago, it's a long time. But it's never really gone anywhere because it doesn't work the way it should work. Like a lot of technology, things don't work. Their promise is great, but they don't work and they become clunky. And then once that's happened, it's out. You're not interested anymore. Nobody's interested in using it. Where I think what I really want to see with VR, particularly and AR, is draping in fashion, for example, as a designer, and being able to develop with some kind of headset that engages you with the body or the form and the fabric and the texture. So if we have a nice glove we can wear that will give us a texture of fabric, that's going to be great. So that you can drape and create within a virtual environment. Or an augmented environment. So we'll be designing in the studio. We're in the studio, but we're seeing the development in front of our eyes, and we're changing it, and we're draping it, and we're forming it, and we're fitting it however we want to, whatever body we want to. That is the thing that excites me for a designer. As a tool, of course, just as we've said, it's a tool, AI is a tool, so this is a tool. And it's not properly there yet. There have been many trials of doing it, and I think it will come. And I'm really looking forward to that point at which it comes. Yeah.
Claire.
Yeah, so I really agree as well. I see VR as aside from how, you know, we're going to use headsets, etc., in the and fashion in the gaming industry. But if we look at a practical application, I really see VR as well for how we can collaborate, how we can design, how we can really immerse ourselves in the studio experience. AR, I am a huge fan of AR though, in terms of the consumer end for how we interact with fashion. I think AR is, I see VR very much for development and AR for the consumer adoption. Consumer adoption is at the moment the big sticking point that we have. We have so much technology that's been developed around the virtual try-on, around the AI with this as well. But it's how do we really push this out to the market? How do we get consumers to adopt it? I don't have the answer for that, but we do have the statistics. It's got real value to the brands, and it's in the brand's interest to really push this out to their customers. You know, the statistics with virtual try-on, I think it's about 64% more likely to end up in your shopping cart if you've bought it, and about 70% less likely to be returned. So what the implications are for how we produce, how we reduce waste, that we can understand more what our customer wants, what they are really buying once they've tried it on, how the fit is. I think this is really huge, and how that affects the bottom line of a brand. And I would really, really like to see this as a very strong step in the on-demand production as well. I think it's a huge, huge part of this for how we can ultimately reduce inventory. So I love AR for the customer end.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's a huge, huge benefit of AR. And then kind of segueing from AR and VR quite naturally into the metaverse, what happened to it? What happened to the metaverse? Where did it go? And what's, you know, where are we going to see the metaverse again? Or has it just disappeared? Claire, why don't you start on this?
So yeah, I see 2022 as the year of the metaverse. It came on the tail end of the pandemic. People wanted to get together, and it brought people together, the same as these meetings bring people together to share information. But I think the real functionality of the metaverse has not yet been explored. I think more than just bringing people together, which we can do through Zoom meetings, it's how do we really engage people in the metaverse? Well, the gaming industry is doing that already, and they've been doing that for a few decades. And is it just the fashion industry? Is it education? It's really across all industries that we're not looking fully at the use for the metaverse. Again, customer adoption is at the center of that, but we need to provide a real value. Where do we go into the metaverse? In September, we were partnering with Pixel Canvas and Translucia for the metaverse. We had a portal where you could wave to people who were in the metaverse. So we could bring people into our IRL events while we were streaming our IRL events into the metaverse as well. But what was really interesting about working with these teams, they were building a metaverse for the entire country of Thailand, and they gave us a little corner of this. So very beautifully designed. But I think they were a stepping point into the real functionality of the metaverse. They were looking at it as a health and wellness, a place for health and wellness. So they're building the functionality that if you were in the metaverse, you could find out information, you could relax, you could meet people, but also if you could only spend a certain amount of hours in the virtual environment. And then you had to have a fitness app that showed that you spent a certain number of hours outdoors as well. So it was a real value and really stepping between the unreal and the real. So I think that's an example of how we can really build it into our lifestyle, how we can find value in there. And there are very few people who are really doing that at the moment.
Yeah. Richard, what relevance does the metaverse have to fashion?
I think eventually it will. I mean, if we go back to 2022 and slightly earlier, I think we all expected this amazing interconnected virtual 3D immersive world to suddenly appear within a matter of months. And there were unrealistic expectations created by a lot of the people, including, somebody that changed their name to reflect that and give the indication, hey, this is just around the corner. And it wasn't, and it was never going to be. For me, that's sort of the concept of the metaverse is more about immersive and engaged digital connections. So now, or for the last 15 years, that's been social media. That's where you go in and you talk to your friends and you share things and you move around with, but making that more transparent and open and less controlled, i.e. decentralized, or moving away from what we've got now. And that's where I believe it will still come. I do believe that will still come. It's a long time before we're living the snow crash experience and moving around and interoperability of fashion was something that was talked about 3 years ago. If I own this as an NFT, why can't I wear it here? Well, you can, but I mean, I've done this. I built NFTs with one version and then a Decentraland version and a Somnium Space version and a Sandbox version. And then you have to develop all of the individual rigging, meshes, avatars, and token access to be able to make that work. And it was a long way off being smooth, and it hasn't really improved. Nobody's been big because metaverse was chucked in a bucket and let's deal with other things for now. Maybe we'll come back to that because everybody's been focused on building infrastructure and technology backends and resources. But I do believe that it will come. But it's probably still another 5 years away when there will be interoperable digital asset ownership and the ability to go quite smoothly from one environment to another where you can connect with friends or an education environment or a business environment or a retail environment smoothly. And within that comes commercial and other elements that come along with it. Like Shopify. Are working with a whole bunch of different immersive spaces and experiences to bring those things together. And I think it will be driven by commerce. It will be companies like that will make it happen. And going back to the virtual try-ons, it's definitely going to make a difference, but it needs one big company or a few big companies to make a major commitment to it so that it becomes almost, why haven't you got this? If so-and-so's got it, and then it will help create a snowball effect on that. And I think the same thing will happen eventually with the metaverse, however we end up defining that. And I think that's part of the problem is nobody really knows what it is and nobody knows how to define it because you can't, because it doesn't exist. And how can you define something that doesn't exist? So it's going to evolve, it's going to change, and things will get smoother and things will get better. And and then one day we'll wake up and go, oh, that's pretty cool. I can go from here to there, and it was smooth.
Do you think a reaction to this for most people has been, we came out of COVID, we were locked in a metaverse kind of, well, whatever, we were locked in during COVID, but there was a feeling of needing to be real again. Are we still suffering from the after effect of COVID from that perspective, that we were in a kind of virtual thinking world for such a long time, and that we have to really understand where we place the metaverse within our lives, how it works.
I think Sean's, the example that actually, sorry, Claire's example that, having physical locations and physical interactions that bring people into that metaverse is really important, because you're not going to end up with people have the Ready Player Me or Ready Player One concept, flop on your headset, and then for the rest of the day you're running around. At least they had running pads and the likes of things that to get their exercise in. But I think it's always going to be it has to be about finding the right balance. That it should be something that enhances and improves your life. If it's something that takes over and potentially destroys your well-being and health, then don't do it. Get off the drug. Go into rehab. Do something else.
And there's quite a lot of research about that as well at the moment, isn't it? People being in this other virtual world, or in a gaming world for too long.
Sean. Yeah, I think it's people are, certain demographics are way more immersed into their phones, their computers, and physical. I'll give you a prime example. One of my daughters is a teacher. She did a video capture of her doing an online seminar with a group of IB students. She's based in Peru, and she just took a video capture. Every single one of the students on her monitor was using an animal avatar. So they were quite happy. They weren't themselves. I mean, they could be whatever they were, but and it was perfectly normal. Everybody was doing it, and nobody was making a joke about it. That's I'm the dog, I'm the cat, I'm the rabbit, whatever it was, and that's how they conducted their lessons in class, and it was perfectly normal. And if she tried to say, "Hey, put your normal cameras on," and go, "Oh, come on, miss, this is us now." So I think there is a generation that's going to come through, which we, as older people, are going to possibly struggle to really relate to, because the next lot are going to be even more immersed.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that about the metaverse, Sean?
Yeah, I think just that what you absolutely everything that Claire and Richard are saying. I think it disappeared for a couple of reasons. One being very marketing driven in terms of development, and for a marketing department with a brand, when you start to see you don't get the return on your investment, and if you're in a corporate environment and you're not making money, and it's clear you're losing money, even though you may have a 3-year plan, but you see this after 6 months or 1 year, it's going to be ditched. So basically that happened. But more important is that it was not user friendly, or what I've seen is not user friendly for the average user because of the power needed with computers and everything else. So it's very clunky, and you can get very, very frustrated very quickly with everything, and you end up saying, okay, I'm old and whatever, it's not my particular thing, but I have been in there and I have tried, and at certain points I think, oh, this is just not working for me and I don't get anything out of this. I think it's also about, as I mentioned before, the emotional entanglement with something that is difficult to find in that environment. But the interesting part for the future, the interesting element for the future of metaverse, I think, Richard, you mentioned, is the immersive environment, I think, and where we can build an immersive environment for fashion, both on the consumer side of being immersed in using it and being in that fashion sphere, but also from the development side. That's really fascinating, I think, for the future, and I think that's what really interests me. So where we've talked about, the headsets and the Vision Pro and AR and VR, when that's interrelated with an immersive experience for developing and designing, that's going to be fantastic. That it's not going to happen tomorrow. It is happening in ways. It's not going to happen tomorrow, and it's not going to be freely accessible for some time. But it will be a really interesting development, particularly for education and fashion education. That's also where I see, and we've touched on this in our 4 years of development, on the immersive environment, let's say metaverse immersive environment for fashion education has great potential. We just need to find the right way to do it and the right way to engage with everybody. I don't think we've found that yet, really.
Find the right partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on from the metaverse to thinking about the sustainable question, is digital fashion truly sustainable? Because one of the kind of starting points that Sean and I had when we started the Digital Fashion Group was thinking that digital technology, digital fashion was a very pragmatic way to ensure a more sustainable industry. Is it sustainable? Do we have proof enough that it is sustainable? And in what ways is it not sustainable? Richard, do you want to start on that one?
The fashion industry, as it stands and as it's evolved, certainly over the last few years, is definitely not sustainable. There is massive overproduction driven by this pursuit of consumption and cheap and easy product, how you can purchase it. And I won't name names, but I guess you can all know where we're coming from. Who are actually some of the best people at using technology and AI and other elements to actually maximize it. But what they're doing is not necessarily good for the planet. If digital fashion can provide the same buzzes, the adrenaline rush, the excitement of what comes with that fast fashion purchase mentality of this is cool, this is new, I need to get this, but do it in a different way, then it should be good. Because sustainability has to be about reducing consumption or making things last longer or have second lives or third lives. We can use digital technology and digital tools, as we've talked about before, to hopefully manage the overproduction, because the garment industry is based around overproduction. You purchase knowing that a big chunk of that is not going to be sold. And that's in the mindset from the beginning, in all of that planning. You've got to try and get rid of that. And this comes back to making to order, machine learning to minimize that. But actually, I'm thinking my focus with B&B and fashion is if we can do things that give people the excitement and the engagement of working with fashion, being creative, being a stylist, being a marketeer, being a retailer of digital fashion, then hopefully they're buying less physical fashion. And that will make an impact. And therefore it becomes sustainable in the macro picture. I mean, certainly if you go back 4 years ago when Ethereum was a proof of work concept and the cost of minting an NFT was more than it cost to produce a garment in some cases, then it wasn't definitely not sustainable. But now, and certainly with generative AI, you can make so many options and so many ideas and so many creative things substantially cheaper than you would do if you were making multiple samples or working through things. So from that point of view, digital tools make the industry more sustainable, but actually we have to change the desire for consumption. That's the key.
That's a very important point. Yeah, Sean, anything to bring?
Yeah, which is kind of opposite, isn't it, to the drive of the fashion industry, as you're saying as well. I think it's from a development perspective, really useful, really interesting, and can have a big impact. So if in the traditional world of developing your collection as a designer, you are cutting and making making iterations of collections. This uses a huge resource. And I think that's where it can have a huge impact on getting to when you're going to be making physical product, on getting to the point at which your physical product is going to be perfect at the final stage. It has the potential to eliminate the physical process before that, within reason. And I think that's something that people, that's being taught now in universities. Designers are learning to use the digital tools, and they're learning a new digital craft, let's say. And I think that is something that is going to have an impact and will eventually have an impact. The balance is an understanding, which I'm sure I don't know, but I'm sure people do know, is what is the balance of the power that's used compared to the physical elements that were used in balancing whether this is sustainable in one way and not in another. And I think that's going to be that's going to be something that we all need to focus on as we move forward with digital tools and digital craft. And really, yeah, I think that's the potential for me. I don't think it's being used just as marketing either. I think it is about really having a sustainable impact. But as you said, Richard, there needs to be a kind of different mindset to consumption. I think it's not only about fashion as well, it's consumption of everything at the moment, isn't it? It really has got to this point where, it seems that everybody needs to buy everything more and more, and deal with discounting, as you say. So you go to a supermarket and you're going to buy 6 things of something because there's a euro off or $1 off. It's cheaper, the bog off concept. That needs to change, but it's very much ingrained in everything at the moment. It will be interesting to see how that's going to change and how it can change, and then the impact of that will be enormous if it does change.
Yeah. Claire?
Yeah, so the word sustainability for me is just so vague, and it's just open to interpretation. It's sort of a kind of a vague goal, and I think everyone is really working towards that. I think having clear definitions for what does it really mean to actually be sustainable, what are guidelines that we should work within would be really helpful. I do think digital product passports are really going to help us get there. I think they're really, really exciting for looking at all the stages that a physical product has been through, where we're sourcing, where everything is produced, etc. So all that information is going to really empower the consumer to change hopefully change their attitude. I mean, it's really like having nutrition information. You can choose your junk food still, but you know what the consequences of that are. So it will empower consumers who want to be empowered. I do want to say that is an economic choice. There are a lot of people who are not able to make that economic choice. I do think fast fashion provides a lot of people in this world with access to clothing. The problem is it's really low quality and they have to keep replacing it. So how do we look at, to Richard's point, not consuming as much, but I think we have to go back and we have to really change how we produce so that the fashion does last longer. It is not entirely an I want, although that is a factor, but it is a socio-economic issue as well that we really need to resolve. And how do we get brands to produce better quality, but less of it so that it lasts? I think, so obviously, I think digital fashion can solve so many issues. When we design digitally and we work with our factories digitally, we're not producing as many samples, we're not producing as much pre-production inventory. This is huge. But when we are using AI takes massive amounts of power, and the power consumption that we're using to produce really needs to be addressed as well. It's something I would love to sweep that under the carpet, but we do need to look at when image generation through AI just takes massive amounts of power, and that is not good for the planet unless it's purely solar powered, which it's not at the moment. So I do think we need to be very honest that while we can digitalize so many parts, so many stages of the industry, are we just shifting the problem to somewhere else? So it's we have to take a lot of responsibility with all of this.
Yeah, good. Thank you. We've kind of rolled the penultimate question into the closing question, which is great because I think we might have some questions from the audience. Ching.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's we've got some questions from the audience, and mostly it's about skill sets. I think that's for most of designers, they are really curious about, the between physical and digital and traditional skill sets. So the questions is about, how can designers take to bridge the gap between physical and digital fashion more effectively? And then what kind of specific skills or like new future skills that they have to practice to, to be able to work in the industry?
Okay,
This is,
so
yeah.
there's two parts to that question. The first part again, tell me the first part.
Well, it's about, bridge the gap between physical and digital fashion more effectively. So what kind of, steps that they can take. And
Sean, do you want to jump in that one?
Sure. I think it's a very important question. And it's a kind of currently maybe an interim period of digital transformation in the fashion industry and in learning to be a designer or developing as a designer. From the point of view, the outset, the designer needs to be a physical designer, and they need to understand what lies behind creativity, behind fashion design as a process, and everything that goes with it. I think I mentioned that before, and I still very much believe in that. So, you have to learn to research, to observe, to look, and to be physical, and you have to understand and learn the traditional crafts that are involved in fashion as well, because many of those are digitized. So, it comes from something that is physical, and learning to work with that and develop your skills as a digital designer as well is the key to success, and how you do manage the two together and you marry the two together. So one really, I think, important area to always concentrate on for your skills is how do I convert the physical, everything I'm doing physically, into the digital world, and what do I need to do? And Richard's mentioned it previously. We talked about Photoshop and Adobe Suites and everything, and we had a manual sewing machines, and now we have electric sewing machines, etc., etc. It's about merging everything together. So you create, you're inspired, you develop, and then you look at how you can also make that digital, or how it is digital in tandem. When I say digital in tandem, the important thing that comes to mind for me is the concept of the digital twin, because that's the very easiest thing you can do as a designer when you're making physical product and physical designs that exist on paper, is digitizing everything at the end of the day and recreating it in a digital world. Once you're comfortable with doing that, and comfortable with working with AI, for example, to assist you in your journey, you are forging a new future as a digital designer, and you're creating the future of being a digital designer. I do think an important point for me that I observe is that digital designers today over the last few years tend to, this is natural, you tend to want to get involved and try everything. So you're looking at all the different things that you now can do with all the digital tools. But I think that becomes an element of multitasking. And for me, multitasking isn't necessarily a good thing, because you're not focusing on what you actually want to do and focusing on the one task at hand. So actually focusing and really deciding what it is you can use and what you need to use, and maybe where AI can replace something that you would have looked at in the past, maybe a digital process that you might have developed in a program, maybe you don't need to do that anymore. Something else will do that for you. And focusing on turning your creativity into your vision is the key thing that you need to focus on. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. And we have one more question. I think we still have time. So I think this question is interesting. It says that, is decentralization in fashion still a thing? So what has actually happened? And is there a good examples?
Oh, I think that's a great question, Richard.
I think it's for Richard, yeah.
Do DAOs live, Richard?
DAOs exist, and they are in principle a brilliant concept. But so is anarchy as a political option. So I do believe that the principles of DAOs and therefore decentralized ecosystems and economies can be really empowering and really change the way that businesses and industries can operate. But they're still very young and very new. I mean, the oldest in our space is probably still only less than 4 years old. And a lot of them have reconfigured and reworked over that time because they don't function. Because as much as it's great that, hey, I'm a stakeholder, I can make decisions, you still need a governance model, you still need management structures, you still need administration things. And to put all that on chain and make it function is really hard. I mean, there are lots of people out there doing that in different ways, and I believe they will come. My thinking with decentralization when it comes to fashion, and therefore business models that come with that, is take it step by step, move, do things that take the principles of decentralization, the principles of DAO, and be transparent. You have to be totally transparent when you're doing these things. You can't just hide it under the guise of a DAO. You have to be transparent with people and see what happened, see if it works, fine tune it, tweak it again, roll it over into the next model. How it actually applies, I mean, I'm going to blow our own trumpet for a little bit, but what we're doing with BNV and the foundation is by having a coin and making that available and accessible to not just people operating in the digital fashion sphere, but in the physical world and across multidisciplinary activities, then you have an ecosystem which is decentralized because it's a separate currency and a separate coin, and people can earn and accumulate and do things with that. You bring one level of interoperability and decentralization into play. But we are probably the first people to do this in across a business or a business sphere, and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to learn. And I'd like to think probably in about 5 to 10 years, we'll have something really, really different and empowering and functional and giving, touching back on what Claire was saying, social economic reasons for people to be involved in new types of economies and be able to be supported or even grow through those activities. So yeah, I firmly believe in decentralization. I believe that it will be applied at some point into the fashion world. We're doing our bit to make that happen, but it's still so early and there's going to be some bumpy roads.
Okay, so thank you for today, and it was really a remarkable and inspiring conversation. And thanks, Leslie, for moderating this roundtable. And it's really important that we have to think about the future of digital fashion, but also how we keep the industry thrive and then more sustainable. And thank you for today. So I talk to you later then. Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.